And we are with Aman Raheja, CISO of the BMO Financial Group. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
All right, Aman. So as you know, I am extremely passionate about the origin story. What made you want to become a superhero in the cybersecurity world? You've obviously done a tremendous amount. You wield a tremendous amount of influence, but there's a fire in there. I want to know where it comes from. What got you here, man?
I hopefully wouldn't disappoint anyone if I say I ended up in security accidentally. When I was back in India, I studied in Nagpur University, and my number one passion was digital signal processing. Now, obviously, it has nothing to do with security whatsoever. I wrote papers on it. We actually developed one of the first speech recognition software in the late 90s with some of my classmates back then.
Speech recognition, who knew that would be a thing, right?
These days, yeah, I guess everybody has one.
Yep.
Talk to Siri, talk to Alexa, right? I mean, that's what we were developing back in late 90s. So I got admission to do a master's at a university called Southern Illinois University. So I came over to do further studies in digital signal processing. When I got there, they actually had some issue, they couldn't offer the course. Well, I looked at the list, and there was one of these strange courses called network security being offered, and I had to get credits to stay in America, so I signed up for the course.
So your entrance into the field of internet security was to maintain your immigration status with having a college credit?
Close enough.
Wow.
I could have taken another course, but
Sure.
I'm like, okay, let me try this. By a year and a half, when I did my final project in master's, I did it in security. Well, even after that, so I graduated right around or after September 11th attacks. So if you remember, there were hardly any jobs. There was nothing that was being offered at the time. I literally saw a 3-line ad in a paper. I still have that clipping actually with me. I don't throw it away. It said, a CGI Perl programmer needed. I had no idea how to do CGI Perl, but I called the guy and I said, I want to do this job. And he said, come on over. It was a Thursday. He asked me to come in on a Monday. I can't forget this because I took my car, I rushed to Borders, I picked up CGI and Perl books because I had no idea what this even means.
That is hilarious.
I practiced the whole, Thursday night all the way through Sunday. And I went for an interview Monday morning.
And you
the guy
stuck it.
had me write me some programs, do a few things, and I did get the job, so I think I did all right.
I think you did more than all right.
So then what happened is when I was there, number one, I helped them rewrite the entire business model of what they were doing in e-commerce back in 2002. It was a website that was selling picture frames and artwork. And their model was very old. They were not using Google Ads and Yahoo Ads as actively, so we had a lot of discussions, and we rewrote the entire website to make it more friendly to that kind of e-commerce. Their site went from maybe doing like a $60,000-$70,000 a sale a month to doing 250 to 300,000 sales a month. So it was a huge change.
When was this in the scale of e-commerce? Like what year would you put this in?
2002, 2003.
So really the internet commerce hadn't really picked up yet.
Yeah.
This was like right at the bleeding edge.
Right.
Unbelievable.
Right. And the interesting thing that started to happen is we used to start getting hacked. Right? There were people who would manipulate query strings or do cross-site scripting and things like that, and actually take advantage of our e-commerce website. And there were artwork that was ordered, which was worth $500, that would go through, get processed, and the actual billing amount was only $5 because these hackers had done some manipulation in the order itself. Okay, that intrigued me. I'm like, okay, we're losing money, so let me figure out. That's how I started doing pen testing, to save the company I used to work for. That became very interesting. So I set up a lab at my house. I started to do things on my own, started learning things in security. And, what do you know, that a lot of people in St. Louis area wanted that kind of capability, someone to come in and look at their environment and do pen testing. So that started a string of engagements where I was consulting with law firms, small banks, small organizations, just consulting and doing pen testing for them.
So you were an accidental pen tester, and you just kind of moved into the role, and then ultimately you came from a position of being a cyber warrior, being somebody on the front lines of fighting against criminals and people who are trying to exploit environments, to now where you are now as a leader of cyber professionals. How did that transition take place?
So after this pen testing experience, again, I joined another organization in St. Louis area for a year. It was a small stint where I did a lot of web administration and some security work. It wasn't until I was contacted by a big bank to join them in security, which changed everything from a life standpoint. So when I was still doing this web administration job. Even until at that point, I didn't know that I will end up in security, though it had become the most interesting thing for me. But unless there were jobs available, remember at that time it was the situation where beggars can't be choosers. There were not enough jobs, so whatever came your way. The interesting thing was, by that point, the field was really taking off, though there weren't a lot of other jobs available. This is in 2004 and 5. Security really started to boom because big banks, big organizations started to see, at least the ones that were forward looking, that this is going to be an element for success. If they don't do this right, if they don't get security right, it'll be a problem. So I joined the bank, and from that point, it was just working hard. And I know it's cliche, but also working on the right things. So not wasting time on things that will not help you. I'll give you a quick example. Vulnerability management was one of my jobs. And after about 2 or 3 months, I'm doing the exact same thing every day. So my belief in life has been to success is if I work myself out of my current job, I will get to do something bigger and more complex.
Very true.
And that's what I used. Interestingly, I also had the programming background thanks to CGI Perl job that I had.
That weekend.
I converted the entire vulnerability management process by writing a Perl script that was access an access database and automate the whole thing, including sending emails for follow-ups.
And what you're pointing out is a big, it's an important trend, in our industry. A lot of tasks are being automated. And so if you look at the prevalent fields of orchestration, if you look at things like deception, AI, ML, right, all part of what we do now and the kinds of technologies that we're looking at now, this is really all about eliminating the noise and getting rid of the mundane, repetitive tasks, right, that we see every day. And it's amazing that existed, back in 2004, 2005 as a philosophy. Yep. And here we are today still applying that and people being worried about their jobs. And yet here we are in cybersecurity with 2 to 3 million unfilled jobs in the field. I find that kind of interesting. To your point, if you continue to evolve your skill set, put yourself out of a job that is repetitive and mundane, you'll actually continue to grow in this field. It's a huge concept, and I appreciate that.
Yeah. So that has necessarily been this recipe, for lack of better terms, to help me continue to boost and get into more complex situations.
Yeah. So speaking of which, this transitions very nicely into your management philosophy or how you build out a security program. You've put together a program that you've referred to as BICT. Extremely intriguing. What it does, it actually ties cybersecurity goals and cybersecurity metrics to the business. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your philosophy and what it means to you?
So before I go there, that's another one. I'll start with a story.
Sure.
Just because I didn't know what it meant at the time. When I was going for an interview, I was traveling to Chicago back in 2015. I stopped by at a McDonald's and I was going to meet with the bank CEO. And I was going to have a discussion, how do I think about security strategy? And by the way, at the time in healthcare sector, strategy was part of my function, but I had not thought of it in a way to talk to a CEO and something that he will remember on what it really means to have a security strategy. Mm-hmm. So, and this is another one, I have the McDonald's napkin to show for it.
You do not. You kept the napkin?
Yes.
Did you frame it?
Haven't framed it yet, but yeah, I think it should be before it really
I put
crumbles.
that up in my office if I'm you.
And I literally came up with, okay, what are the core components that will interest a business leader for them to understand what do we do in security?
Mhm.
Everyone knows that we are there to protect the organization. So everyone gets it. Right? That's the threat management piece. Everyone understands it. There are some CISOs who entirely run their programs on compliance because there are industries, and sometimes it's also lack of capabilities where that's the only thing that they can convey to the management, and that's all they understand because they don't want big fines, they don't want to get into trouble with PCI or certain regulators.
Well, let's look at the structure of the modern CISO's compensation. They're sometimes compensated or bonused or incented on the amount of audit findings, or if they keep the audit findings under a certain radar, or if they have a certain amount of audit findings, it contributes negatively, to their compensation.
Yeah.
What you're saying is bang on, spot on. As a matter of fact, a compliance-driven security program is what I've seen at a lot of these financials, and that's why I'm super interested in where you took it from there.
Yep. And then the third component that I couldn't let go was the fact that you get into any board meeting, they want to know how do you compare with everyone else in the industry. So the industry benchmarking and industry standards become the third core pillar, which I know any CEO will be interested in. And then finally, tying it all together to the business goals. And if you are not able to show how you will help the business grow eventually, I think it's not worth it.
Yeah.
And what you're doing is checking a lot of boxes. Yes, you're doing some protection, but you're not helping business grow. At that point, it is a unit or an organization that sucks up money. Right? This is where technology used to be 15 years ago. If you remember back in late 90s, even early 2000s, businesses saw technology as a burden. That narrative has to shift.
Yeah.
It did with technology.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm doing with this security strategy framework is wanting to help to do the same for security as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because we can say, okay, take simple example. One of the business goal is employee experience. Why can security not work to create an environment where passwords are not needed? Can you imagine the experience employees will have?
It's the frictionless experience, right? Security necessarily comes with friction, and the more friction you introduce to a user population, the less likely they're going to adopt your control, and more importantly, try to subvert it. We see it every day.
Right. Now, on the another plus side of that example is I challenge any big organization to call their call center and find out, or help desk, how many calls they get just for password resets.
Probably the majority of them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there's also a business benefit to it.
Correct.
Right. So there are problems that we can solve to help the business become more efficient and grow faster and reduce the operational cost. But as security professionals, we don't look at it that way. We're already running after secure. That is basic. That all of us have to do no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to be a business leader, you need to make that shift to start thinking, how are you solving business problems and not just security problems?
Mm-hmm.
It has to go in tandem.
I think that's an incredible thesis, and one that I'm seeing more and more of. But again, it's very common that we find tacticians in this
Yep.
industry, but not strategists, right? Somebody who's going to, again, tie business needs, business drivers to a security program. As a matter of fact, I've been challenged by boards, executives alike through the course of my career. Hey Ajay, how does this map to my goals as an industry? And part of my job, right, has been to have a sense of empathy for these business leaders or for these leaders, and to kind of get into their position and say, if you're a bank, you're in the business of banking. If you're a manufacturer, you're in the business of manufacturing. And how is this security optimization or this technology that we're going to introduce or process that we're going to introduce going to map to me producing tiny screws at a higher rate, or what intellectual know-how or what cyber Armageddon am I preventing in this executive's world? So that's, I think, how BICT kind of fits very nicely into that narrative.
Yeah, and I'll give you two other quick examples, I think,
Please.
which kind of cement why this is so important. And one is something that we already implemented in the past, in my experience, where we went to the business to solve a problem around identity access management.
Yes.
Now, I did not solve a security problem at all. So what I went to the business with initially is, The problem was related to HR onboarding, on how much time it takes to onboard people. This was in one of my previous organizations.
Mm-hmm.
And we went with a proposal. We said, we will spend X million dollars to solve this problem. And I'm not talking about in tens, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it was a small number. But the saving over 5 years was going to be in tens of millions of dollars in productivity gain,
Wow.
right? So we made that business case, we got an approval to solve the business problem. I did not even pitch it as a security solution, and got the money to implement a new IAM tool in the organization. And within months, we were actually able to demonstrate by doing auto provisioning, give birthright access to people, give them access based on their roles, and implementing the solution. They actually started getting hundreds of thousands of productivity saving every month. And that was because we implemented this solution. And this is the key. We identified the hot spot. So this was their call centers where the turnover rate was 40 to 50%.
Wow.
One, it reduced the turnover rate, because what used to happen until we implemented this tool, people used to come in job. Imagine you're a call center person, comes to a job, sits there for 3 weeks. You don't even have access to tools to do your job. Not only it's a productivity gain, after 3 weeks, getting these free checks, some of these people just left.
Yeah.
Because they found another job which paid them $1 an hour more.
And it was more interesting. Right?
Yeah.
There was no repetitive, mundane tasks. Coming back to the process automation that we were talking about earlier
And
on.
customer service are already tough jobs. This
Sure
is where
is.
people call to complain most of the time.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I have a lot of sympathy for these roles, and I actually think these are some of the bravest people who take, you know, that front line for the organizations and businesses.
Yeah.
And if there's anyone we need to make life easier for, that should be the first target.
Tons of respect for the front line. And so, what is BICT? High level. What do what does it stand for? What does it mean to you? And what do you feel is your philosophy behind it?
So let me break it down into 3 different parts.
Sure.
Number one, more simplistically, you know, going back to, I know I went in the reverse order. So BICT is a security strategy that delivers business value, that gives you clear line of sight about industry benchmarking and standards, that takes compliance into consideration, because that's obviously a big thing in a lot of organizations, and you have to make sure that's part of it. And then obviously threat management, which is the core of anything we do in security. So that's really what BICT is. Now, what I think it can become, that's the more powerful thing. It can do 2 things. Number one, it can actually help you gather requirements and start developing your strategy, taking those 4 components. So you can say, here are the 5 business goals. What can I do for the business from a security standpoint to actually enable those goals? Whether it's cloud, whether it's DevOps, whether it's using SaaS vendors, whether it's fintech, anything and everything the business wants to do. How can you enable it? So that's your business value. Industry benchmarking, where do you stand? There are NIST, ISO, all these standards available, and a lot of benchmarking tools available. That's not hard for you to get information from and use it and incorporate into your strategy. Compliance is probably the easier one. Regulators have already given us a lot of things that we need to comply with.
Yes.
A lot of times regulations are a bit backward looking, because regulations come in response of something that has already happened.
Correct.
Breach XYZ happened, here's new regulations how you should notify us. Breach ABC happened, here's a new regulation that you should have these kind of controls in place. So compliance is that aspect that should be incorporated. And on the threat management side, you should be doing threat modeling, pen testing, not the old plain risk assessments, but more active testing of your environment and creating a very clear set of requirements that you need. Now, the other piece of this BICT framework, which I really enjoy, and was the first thing we implemented in my current organization, was prioritization methodology. So what we did was, we said, if I implement security initiative X, Y, and Z, one of them gives me $10 million savings. So, okay, let's pick cloud as an example. organization wants to get into cloud. And if I can say that by implementing the cloud security framework, the bank can get a $10 million saving. Okay, that's your business value. From an industry benchmarking standpoint, what is your maturity level? From a compliance standpoint, what are the regulators expecting you to do?
Yep.
And then from a threat standpoint, what are you mitigating? And then what we did was we started giving them numerical values. So we said if your saving is more than $10 million, you give 40 points. If it's $7 million, 30 points. If it's $3 million, 10 points. And if it's not a saving, you just have to do it for ICT reasons,
Yep.
you got 0 points.
Interesting.
And then we did the same thing for I, C, and T. We had numerical values. And now you can stack cloud security, privileged user management, rolling out DLP. You can just list every initiative that's on your project plan and score them with BICT methodology.
Quantifiable methodology.
Quantifiable, and at the end, you can actually sit down in front of anyone and you have a justification why you need to do cloud before you need to roll out a DLP,
Yep.
or why you need to do DLP first before you do identity access management.
Cloud is
Very
enormous
clear.
right now. It is so huge, and so I'd love you to expand, on how BICT would apply to, say, a cloud adoption initiative. Say you were going to Office 365, the most common cloud migration that I could see going on today.
Yeah.
How would you run that through the BICT process?
So, number one, from a business standpoint, and drivers can be different in different organizations. One that I hear the most is if we continue to add more to our email servers, you probably need to build another data center, right? It's getting to a point where the expansion has become immense because of the amount that we depend on our SharePoints, our email environments, and so on.
Social, Yammer, all of it.
Social, yes, exactly.
Yep.
So that's the business proposition for why organizations want to go on cloud. Whether it's Office 365, some are also adopting Google, and so on. I mean, whatever the vendor may be,
Doesn't matter.
irrespective.
Mm-hmm.
Now the thing is, there is clear business benefit. If you do not implement the right security framework upfront to go to cloud, you just can't do it. Not in my industry, at least.
Yep.
Right? But the same applies, I think, should apply to every industry because there are risks associated with it. And you
100%.
should recognize them and do something about it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, most of these vendors provide great service in helping you understand those risks. They have benchmarking tools and things that you can use to actually get there. So let's say the saving for my organization, and I'm just throwing a number out, is $20 million to go to cloud for our email, SharePoint, and these kind of tools. Right there, that's my 40 points for B, right? This is what I want to enable, this is what I want to focus on.
I love this.
From an industry benchmarking standpoint, I can look at maturity. Where are we? Do I have a cloud security strategy? I don't. Do others banks have it? Some do, some don't. So maybe on a security scale, if I do maturity assessment, I fall 1 out of 5. Okay, that is there's a reason I need to be at least at a 3.5 or 4 on a maturity scale for me to say we are ready to adopt cloud.
Mm-hmm.
So
We
I
haven't
put-
even talked about a product yet.
Yes.
That's the most interesting part to
Yeah,
me.
exactly. This is all capability
Yep.
related. It has
Yep.
nothing to do with the vendor you choose or partner you go with. This is pure capability based. So now I can say 30 points from a maturity standpoint or from a I,
Yep.
that next element, this is what I need. From a compliance standpoint, there are more than enough compliance requirements on how do you do access control, privileged user management, data loss prevention, and I can go on. It's a pretty long list.
That's
From a
another podcast.
compliance needs standpoint. Yeah. From a compliance standpoint, everything that's needed to protect this email, this data, no matter where it sits, another 40 points. Because if you don't do it, I bet you're going to get a big finding from internal or external audit. And then finally, threat management. If I don't implement any controls and put data out, think about the things that are needed. What about forensics? A lot of people don't even think about it.
Mm-hmm.
So what and if data gets breached in a cloud environment, how will you get the hard disk? Would you?
No.
No.
God help you.
Right? Exactly. What about logging? you're not logging,
Nope.
the partner is logging.
Correct.
Are you getting feeds from them?
And
It's
where
a
are those
simple
logs?
thing.
Where's the data residency of
Where
those
is
logs?
it going?
Oh
How
my
are you
God.
then
Yep.
merging it with your own data to get something meaningful out of it?
Mhm.
So if you start digging down in the threat aspect of it, then you find out, I'm not controlling the configuration, so something can go wrong. I don't have the logs, I don't have forensics. What about e-discovery? If something happens from a legal standpoint, then you need to start digging in. Right? So those are all the components you need to think about. And if none of those exist, here's my another 40 on threat. So this is one of the highest scorers right there.
Mhm.
Where there's a business value, industry benchmarking, I need to do more work. I'm in some place but not where I need to be. And then from a compliance threat management, it's a big deal. Now, if you compare that with me implementing, something else, let's say an identity access management, and I start scoring the same way, and if I get a score of 70 versus I just got 110 here, it's a clear priority
Where are you going to spend your
for
time?
the organization.
Yep.
Right? So it becomes as simple as that.
Yep. Aman Raheja, Pearl expert, CISO friend, thank you very, very much. Your insights are incredible. Looking forward to doing more of this in the future.
Of course. Thanks, Ajay.
Not a problem.
All right.
Thank you all for joining us today. Appreciate you all.